I'm delighted to be here. In 2003, Laurie Kerr, who is with us, in an article titled "How Two Columbus Circles Saved the World," published in the Wall Street Journal, wrote, "When it comes to designating architectural landmarks, there should be a special criterion, quite apart from artistic merit, for buildings that express the political zeitgeist. We may not especially like these buildings, but they stand as remnants of the ideas that shaped our age. In New York, one such building was the World Trade Center. Another is 2 Columbus Circle. And of course, we see the Twin Towers on the left, designed by Minoru Yamasaki and completed in 1973. And on the right, 2 Columbus Circle, as it was originally designed by Edward Durrell Stone and completed in 1965. Kerr went on to state that 2 Columbus Circle, as originally designed, broadcasts a geopolitical message and was, quote, one of New York's few tangible reminders of America's response to the Cold War. It stands as an emblem of an earlier, perhaps more innocent time when we thought that an architecture that projected our inclusive goodwill by incorporating the outside world would help to save that world from communism. By 2003, however, with the fall of the Soviet Union, an historical fact, 2 Columbus Circle itself had fallen victim to neglect and vandalism, its Venetian-inspired arcade boarded up, and its once glamorous interior damaged by serious leakage. As reconfigured by Brad Cloakville in 2008, 2 Columbus Circle was shorn of its earlier meaning, or one might say, its mid-century mindset, with different values and different preoccupations. What was the mid-century mindset, as expressed through architecture and the built environment? It was to a large extent rooted in optimism and ambition. It produced an unprecedented building boom in New York City, and those who promoted it thought it would last forever. Mid-century optimists contended that technology would not only improve our daily lives, but unleash possibilities for a world without limits, unfettered by conventional constraints and not yet burdened by any sense or concern for sustainability. Nuclear power would be clean, safe, and inexhaustible. Here, of course, we see 3 Mile Island, the power plant near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which opened in 1974. 5 years later, it became the site of the most serious accident in a commercial nuclear power plant. And just 15 years earlier, at the New York World's Fair, General Motors, at that time the largest corporation in the world, had us all happily living in a nuclear age world, real-life counterparts to the ever-smiling Jetsons. Late-model Chevrolets would be replaced by family-sized flying machines, and here we see genuine skyscrapers being held up on slender columns. Back on planet Earth, mid-century optimists and New York's ambition to become the de facto capital of the world could be seen in one of the city's modernist architectural icons, the United Nations, built between 1947 and 1952, designed by an international team that was led by Wallace Harrison and that included Le Corbusier. The 30-story Secretariat building's glass curtain walls were widely considered to be both aesthetic and technological marvels. They were, in fact, the first curtain wall designed at that scale for that large a building. Over the years, the United Nations has weathered the realities of post-war geopolitics, but its once pioneering glass walls have proven less than fully sustainable. The walls were originally uninsulated single-panel glass, and to compensate for a host of problems, there was a film that was applied to the walls, but it had less than ideal aesthetic results. And so there was a total recladding, this time with operable windows. With inoperable windows. It originally had operable windows. Was completed in 2012. They tried, the people who masterminded that recladding, tried to maintain a sense of the mid-century aesthetics.
Use the room, okay.
Another of the city's great architectural reflections of the mid-century mindset was Lincoln Center, and here we see President Eisenhower at the groundbreaking, and it reflected not only the mid-century mindset, but the city's ambition to become a true cultural capital, which at that time it wasn't. People forget that as late as the 1959, New York was really thought of principally as an economic capital and not as a cultural one. So Lincoln Center was intended not only to provide homes for some of the chief cultural institutions in town, but as President Eisenhower himself said, it was intended to prove that democratic capitalism could produce more than simply a high standard of living, and that it could in fact attain artistic excellence, produce artistic excellence. This is a aerial, obviously, of the complex as it was completed in 1968 with the finishing of the Juilliard School. Now, in order to make way for that vision, the area was designated a slum. If we look at these buildings today, we might not see them as slums. We might see them as completely sustainable, but that was not the attitude of the time. And the mid-century mindset thought that the way to save the city was to tear down large portions of it. In addition to the creation of Lincoln Center, a large portion of the Lincoln Square urban renewal area was rebuilt with this housing, Towers in the Park style housing. Take a very quick detour to see a contemporary vision of Lincoln Center and Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro's very different vision of how green space might be introduced into a city. But the Towers in the Park comes from Le Corbusier, and this was his plan for Paris in 1925. Unfortunately, as realized in New York, originally we see that something of that vision is maintained. Here, the buildings are obviously of a lower scale, but the sense of the open space is maintained. This is the Williamsburg houses in Brooklyn, completed in 1935, just a year after the founding of the New York City Housing Authority, co-designed by William Lescaz, who played such a critical role in bringing a European-inspired architectural modernism to this country. But in terms of towers in the park, very often the vision was compromised. Sometimes it became towers in the parking lots. In contrast, however, to other cities where large-scale public housing has been torn down. This is, of course, Pruitt-Igoe by Minoru Yamasaki in St. Louis that was completed in 1955 and torn down, demolished in a very well-publicized demolition process less than 2 decades later. New York actually has not torn down significant portions of its public housing. We have a huge stock of it. And it poses very, very serious challenges, which I know will be addressed later today. Another realm in which the mid-century mindset was reflected in the architecture of New York is, of course, the skyscrapers, the commercial realm. And here we see Phyllis Lambert with the architect Mies van der Rohe in front of inspecting the model for his iconic Seagram building that she was so instrumental in realizing. It elevated the glass and steel form to an unprecedented height of artistry with its bronze structure. Every detail of it, inside and out, was elegant. It did, however, lead to a more, in the hands of epigones, it led to a somewhat more compromised and mediocre vision. These buildings often presenting serious problems in terms of sustainability with technologies that weren't always tested. And here we see, of course, Lower Manhattan as it appears in the beginning of the 21st century, with some issues of sustainability being addressed head-on, others being waiting to be addressed. Last slide. Was all of this a bubble? What was the mid-century mindset a kind of aberration? Was this optimism and this ambition not seen before and not seen after? Well, in some ways the answer is yes. And here we see a literal bubble that the architect Buckminster Fuller proposed for a 2-mile in diameter section of Midtown. He proposed this in 1960, and he described it, or he promised, that it would relegate weather and reduce air pollution. Buildings would not have to be separately heated and cooled because the dome would keep everything at a constant temperature. And how would this be financed? How would this bold vision of the future be financed? The architect contended that the money that the city saved in not having to pay for snow removal would be able to underwrite this proposal in 10 years. So now, without that optimism necessarily, without that ambition, without that bubble, literal or figurative, we are faced, we are here to sort out the results, the good and the bad, of the mid-century mindset. Thank you very much.